Now start letting people in. Hello, hello. Hello, hello. Hello, hello, one and all. Welcome to Piano Tech Radio Hour. It's great to have you here once again with us, enjoying another Saturday. Thank you for showing up so close to Easter time. We can't wait to hunt some eggs and eat some chocolate. But in the meantime, we'll have a little time to talk about pianos and spend some more time with a good friend from the community with a lot of interesting things to share. So I'm just letting everybody in here, making sure the last minute stragglers join in. Ooh, I wonder who Stanford Crew is. That's kind of an interesting name. Admit. And hi, Wayne. How's it going, Mr. Ferguson? Good to see you there. Representing Canada, Canadian side of things. Got a fun audience here. We got Ernest Unrau here, who I know you have a connection with Glenn. And yep, more and more folks are streaming in to the session. Good to have you all here. More and more. All right, so we'll have to wait. I don't know why it's taking people a minute to get in here, but that's fine. And so we'll just sit tight while people jump in. We got Stephen Bucher. He's always in some vaulted shirt or some sort, working on some kind of crazy organ maybe or something. Good to see you there. Nancy Salmon checking in. Good to see you. Yeah, who's Stanford Crew? If you're there, Stanford Crew, let me know what's going on. Who's that? You got your little Pac-Man icon. That's kind of funny. It's cool. All right, just give me one more moment and we'll make sure that everybody's getting in here. And also on Facebook, I'll share with people how to join. If you're just checking us out on Facebook and YouTube, we will have a join link momentarily in that chat. I'm just getting that ready. Yep, here it is. Okay, so let me quick put that in the chat, admit a couple more people, and then we'll get rolling. Hey, Doug Gregg, good to see you. One of our good friends out there on the East Coast. All right, momentarily, let me check in. Facebook and YouTube. Hello there. And on the socials. Join us on Zoom if you're out there. Okay. All right, great, guys. Sounds like it's about time we can get started. So let me load my notes and we'll do that. And here's my notes. Let's get that rolling. Okay, so welcome everyone. All the little stragglers got in to Piano Tech Radio Hour. We come here every Saturday to meet with and learn from the most fascinating and knowledgeable folks in the piano world, including manufacturers, rebuilders, musicians, makers of other instruments, and of course, piano techs. Our mutual goal is to become better at a craft, to help each other, and to create an ever more musical world together. Piano Tech Radio Hour is brought to you by Piano Technicians Masterclasses, an online learning resource that brings you cutting-edge instruction from piano industry masters without leaving your home. You can find out more at www.pianotechniciansmasterclass.com. And I'm going to share in the chat here, as well as on Facebook and YouTube, a few links that I think you'll find interesting. One, we just finished up a French polish masterclass with Douglas Gregg, who I just mentioned, who's on the audience today. And we are about to have a David Clavins masterclass. David Clavins is that guy that builds giant pianos that you have to take a staircase to play, giant soundboards, giant bass strings, a really unique piano innovator who's really been doing what he's been up to for decades. And it's just, it's been gaining exposure. I actually remember, I would say like 20 years ago, I remember my friend saying, yeah, there's some piano at some thing over there. I remember I saw you had to climb a staircase to play. And that's all I heard of it, right? And then literally a couple decades later, a decade and a half later, I'm like, oh, that's David Clavin. That's Clavin's pianos. And he's doing some very innovative stuff. Not only is he building those pianos, but he's created a new invention called the Una Corda piano, which is a very elegant small piano with one string per note. And it sounds beautiful, and was commissioned by a very accomplished sort of popular and classical improvisational pianist. And so it's a beautiful instrument, and he's now like distributing them. I've helped him move some of those Una Corda pianos into the US through California, and we've tuned a couple in New York and stuff like that. So very interesting stuff. And then beyond that, in the chat, I'll put this other stuff in there more for later after the session. There's a feedback link. We always like to have your feedback. We have a podcast, which you can listen to in your car, in the workshop, whatever. Subscribe link is also in the chat there. And then if you want to join us each week for Piano Tech Radio Hour, there is a link to do that for just $16 a month. That's bit.ly/join PTRH. That's bit.ly/join PTRH. And I'll make sure that link is in the chat there as well momentarily. And then, and then we'll get going with this session. So let's say here, for those of you that joined us just today, that one time, right? If you did want to return weekly and make it easier on yourself, you can always subscribe at bit.ly/join PTRH. And we'll make sure that the folks on the socials have that link as well. And without further ado, let's introduce our guest for the day. Let us choose to spotlight myself, and we'll spotlight him, Glenn, and then we'll get the introduction going. So today's guest is Glenn Cuthbertson, and a very, very interesting story, which we actually delved into last week, and we're continuing this week. Being born profoundly deaf, it would be considered an insurmountable handicap that closes the door for any musical experiences. But with the power of powerful hearing aids, the door was actually opened up for Glenn Cuthbertson, our guest today, who not only learned to play the piano from a young age, but pursued a career as a concert pianist, piano technician, piano teacher, and on the side, a harp builder. His own piano is a 1915 Steinway D Concert Grand that he rebuilt and customized with many upgrades. We learned quite a bit about that last week. And in particular, he utilized the WNG composite action, and we did a bit of exploration on his knowledge of that, and kind of exposing us to WNG and what he finds useful about that system. So if you missed that session, you can subscribe and you can check that out in the member area. But let's welcome Glenn. Hi, Glenn. Welcome to Piano Tech Radio Hour.
Good to be here with.
Yeah, it's great to see you. So I know what we said we might do this week. So last week, we talked a little bit about your story. We talked a little bit about the Steinway rebuild project, which maybe we'll have time to delve into again today. But I think what we really wanted to do is learn a lot more about the harp construction that you've been doing. And so I think we'll jump into that presentation first. And then just for the audience's knowledge of kind of the process here, there may be some Q&A at the end. So if you've got some questions, maybe, and you're going to want to engage, you could put your questions in the chat or like raise your hand. And for the last 10, 15 minutes, we'll make sure we open it up for questions from the audience. If there's no questions, that's fine. We got more stuff we can talk about. But, Glenn wanted you guys to know, nothing's off limits. There's nothing taboo about asking him about his journey as a deaf person in the piano industry, as a musician, all of these things. So feel free to, we all have like a ton of curiosities, I'm sure. And Glenn is more than happy to kind of answer those questions, no matter how irrelevant they may seem or silly. It's all about learning about each other. Yeah. So Glenn, anything more to say about that? Questions people have or anything before we dive into the presentation?
I think we can just dive in. Let's see
All
what you
right.
got.
Sounds good. All right. Let me do a little share the presentation here, do a present, and then I'm going to do a screen share and we'll take a look at that. So the first thing we're going to do here is listen to a recording of this particular instrument that Glenn built from scratch. We're going to see the process of how he put it together. But first, let's hear what it sounds like. I'll make sure my volume is up a little bit and we'll take a little listen. All right, absolutely beautiful, Glenn. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, thank you.
Sounds great. Sounds in tune. Sounds full and rich, and all that good stuff. So we have this presentation here that we want to roll through, and I think you've got some idea of. We put it in an order where you can kind of explain each slide and tell us about the process. I had one question up front, which I don't know that I got a knowledge or understanding of, but would be useful before we begin. Did you design the harp? Like these different, the shape of it, the carving, all that stuff. Are there parts that you designed? Are there parts that you took from other sources? What's the source of the design of the instrument?
Yes, I did design it entirely from scratch. And I should give a backstory to how I got involved with it in the first place. My younger daughter said, "Hey, Dad, I'd like to play a harp." And so we looked online and found a harp kit place where you can assemble your own. And we bought a small one and we put it together. And it came together so easily that I thought, maybe this is something I can pursue a little bit further. So I got the blueprint for a bigger design and built that one. And it turned out even better. And I used that for my older daughter's wedding reception. And then I got thinking, I always like to think outside of the box and to try to upstage anything I see. And I wanted more strings on there as well. So I proceeded to get a very large paper that would allow me to draft in the side profile of the harp and start drawing out with just the spacing of the strings and how long they should be and so forth. Excuse me. And so one of the things that we want to know before we get going is a scale design is the most critical part of the success of an instrument, any instrument, that harp, piano, and whatever else. So very quickly with a sheet of paper here, if you can just see that, a C8 starts at 2 inches, and every time you double the length, you go down an octave. So C7 is 4 inches, and C6 is 8 inches, and C5 and so forth. So middle C, C4 is roughly 32 inches, and in real life, you actually take a percentage of that, but that's theoretical. But once you get down to C3, then it starts becoming 64 inches, or roughly 5.5 feet. Now we've got a problem. If we go to a C2, that length has to double and represent about 11 feet. We have a serious problem because pianos are only built to 9 feet. And then if you want C1 on the bottom of the piano, you have to have 22 feet. And if you want to have the Imperial Bösendorf with a C0, well, then you need a 44-foot string. So obviously, that is a major problem that had to be addressed. So anything above middle C, you can scale with the gauges and the string length and all instrument piano types and so forth. Basically are in a narrow parameter, but below middle C, that's when things really, really open up. So before I can even get on a piece of paper to draw it, I have a chart that would show how the string design must be. And it shows the total tension of a harp in this case. They particularly designed it, the one you're looking at and listen to. And we have about 1,500 pounds of tension on there that had to be built strong enough to accommodate. Then there are 4 parameters that, excuse me, that need to be addressed. One is your, I gotta look around here. It's going to be your tension, percentage string tension. What you have is the string will break at 100%, and so you have to take a fraction of that, roughly 50 to 60%, to keep the wire or the string, nylon string, from breaking and under normal use. So that's what this is over the range. And as you get down to the base, it's lowered down, and you don't want to go beyond a certain point. Then we have a ratio. Sorry. Okay, this is what I meant first. This is a string percentage breaking point strength. So you want to keep it in around 60 to 50%. And on this one, it's a tension to length ratio. You don't want to have the division of multiplication division of it to be higher than 3, and you don't want to have it less than 1. If it's higher than 3, then it gets too stiff and hard to pluck. And if it's less than 1, then it becomes too slack, like a clothesline. It just doesn't have any energy in there, and you lose a higher power torque in a string. It gets very dead and dull. So ideally, around a 2 gives a nice feel, and a piano would have to do that as well.
Quickly, before you move on, show that last one again. And then I just, because it's a little bit blurry on our end, I want to know, like on the y-axis, what does it say? Yeah, what is that? It says tension length ratio. Okay.
Yeah.
And then,
the bottom, it's going to be the notes.
Okay. Okay.
So,
got it.
So this is correct.
Got it.
This would be a treble, and the treble would be much tighter, and as you go down to the bass, it gets more and more slack.
Okay.
Somewhere in here, you've got to start addressing middle C and above, and then below middle C, and all instruments that go into the bass register have this problem to contend with. The longer you can make the strings on a piano in particular, the further this can go down, because the plain wire will go down further. But sooner or later, you've got to get into wrapped strings in order to keep it fitting inside the box.
Quick question. Can you explain why it jumps around a little bit at the left of the graph? Is it because you're sort of using the same length, sort of like different lengths, but a same tension? You see how it kind of jumps up and down every three notes? Yeah.
What it's going to represent is the range of this particular string gauge.
Got it. Yeah.
So if you got a short string and it's lengthened for a particular gauge, they behave a little differently. Then you go to the next gauge and it keep going down. So that bumpiness is as you're shifting the gauges according to the length.
Got it. Thank you.
So you got to tweak things. So sometimes you have the lengths can't be changed too much because you got to fit in a basic ratio. And I'll start off again with a C7 on a harp. You don't go up to C8. It's not possible. So I'll start with a C7 being about 4 inches, and then C6, I will have just a little bit left, maybe 90% of double. So 8 inches minus a little bit. And then the next one would be 16 inches, or you reduce the percentage, and that'd be 15 inches. So you're trying to use that as your reference to design your string, what's called a harmonic curve. And that had to be in there. Otherwise, you're going to have either lots of string breakage because you're exceeding it, or you're going to have dull string because there's not enough tension in there to give life to the string.
Okay? Glenn, yes, excellent. I need to know, how did you figure this stuff out? Like, did you find some book on harp making? Or is this like on some harp builders forum or something? Like, how did you
Yeah,
figure
that's
out this process? Yeah.
Yeah, good question. Jerry Brown at the time was the leader or the CEO of Music Makers, which is not far from where you're living, just in the eastern state there. And he put out a book, The 12 Golden Rules of Hype Building, and I got the book, and it also explains that. And they can download from the hypekit.com the very program for free that you can plug in a number and design any of your own folk instrument, from ukulele to a full-size harp or whatever you want, and that gives you the parameters. So it's not out of my own head; it is with resources. So I'm glad to clarify that. So
That's cool.
couple more points. Then you also want to look at your you want to look at. Am I holding it right? Yeah, string tension. So what you want to do is, this here represents the highest string, so it's going to have maybe 10 to 15 pounds of pull. And as you go up toward the bass, then the tension gets higher and higher to between 50 and how many pounds is it? Anyway, this is how many pounds it's pulling. So the sum total of all these string pulling is what the soundboard has to be able to withstand. And then the last thing is the string gauges. You will see that the finished strings start getting thicker and thicker until we get to a point here where we have to have steel core with fiber with a nylon wrap before we can go into steel, fiber, and bronze wrap. So this would be more like a copper wrap that you see in a piano, but sometimes if you get here too thin and it's too much of a jump from the thickest nylon string, and so we have two separate ranges for bass strings in order to have the smoothest curve possible to go through. And that's why the Cosset pedal harps have more of that gooseneck, and the Celtic harps have just a gradual curve in there. They don't go down as deep for one, and they're compromising a bass, and they just don't have the same tone quality. So the bigger the harp, the bigger the piano, the better your tone. It's just the way the physics work.
And that's why David Clavins builds those giant pianos.
Absolutely. And the bass on that thing is utterly incredible.
Yeah,
I was just blown away by that when I heard it. So, okay, back to the slideshow.
Okay, perfect. 1 minute. Let's see here. All right, there we go.
Okay, so what we're looking at here is an initial mock-up of all the parts. I used template and jig to be able to make the parts, starting with the base, and then I will make the sides on there, put the extended wings on it, which most type makers don't do. They just have straight sides. I like to just have that grateful bulb on the bottom. And then the neck, the swoop, that had to fit inside the pillar, and all of that had to be pre-fitted so that becomes a constant throughout the construction of the harp. You don't guess later, it has to fit perfectly. And once that's in there, and that is going to be based on a full-size drawing, side profile. So whatever I draw on there, I match up exactly, so that when it fits together, it fits just like as good as you see it on paper. The pillar itself is probably close to 20 pounds, 25 pounds of maple that had been laminated in very different directions so that it has strength to resist splitting and excessive warping, that it tend to warp a little bit over time. So we move on to the next slide. And we see the machine that I turned the pillar with. So I designed and built this because there's no wood laid out there that's big enough or long enough, as well as it'd be too expensive. So starting with a plywood board and some aluminum rails underneath to keep it flat. Excuse me. I have the metal aluminum barb at the track. And then I have an angle grinder, common point Makita angle grinder with a special 3-bladed bit that will carve. So it's intended actually for carving, like for chainsaw carving and that sort of thing, or grooving out seat for a wooden chair. That's the intent of that. So that was a perfect tool for it. And I made the sliders so it can go across the length as well as a limited travel in and out. Yeah, that metal pipe there. So everything is hand built with my little milling machine where I can do it. And then using an old drill, I just use that to use a Maytag and washing machine belt to spin the pillar around as a card. Now down the middle, you see a template That template can be made to any profile that you want within a reasonable width and diameter. So we start with about 3 inches in the middle to the center part, and up to about 6 inches diameter on the top and the bottom. So whatever profile you carve out, we can do. The next slide will show a clearer picture of what happens next. So there's a metal pin that it had been aligned in order to follow the cutting edge of the rotating disc. And that is what's going to follow the template along the whole length. So the next slide would show the pillar and the rough being assembled on there and ready to go. You turn on the drill and you turn on the cutter and just have at it. So as you progress in the next slide, you'll see that after maybe about a day's work, you get rid of all the solder that you can see underneath the stand there in the bottom, and you get the card profile in there. And many hype makers will be content with that. And some builders, one hype I built, that was it. You don't go any further. It has your own beauty in that sense. And you can, because it's maple, you can stain it any color you want. And then I just generally use an oil based varnish, everything to finish it off. Okay, moving along. Now we have a picture of how I do the fluting. So I have a laminate trimmer set in a cradle that has a depth control, and I've got blocks of wood that limit the travel length. And on the tail end of it, not the top end, but the far end, I have an index of 12 positions. So I index it in, put a bolt into it, and hold it fast, and then I just carve in, and one at a time, I carve all the flute around the circle of it. So that adds an element of elegance to it. And then moving next. Now we're just taking a quick look at how the harp looks pre-assembled to see how the pillar and the base and all that is going. So instead of a big clunky 25-pound block of wood, we have a pillar that's still astonishingly, if I recall, is around 12 pounds. About half the weight came off in wood chips. So it's a little bit pricey when you buy the wood, but that's part of the process. Okay, moving on. Now we come into the artwork. The artwork, I start off with pieces of paper, folded in half, so I can get a mirror image symmetry and a lot of achy wrist drawing on a window to be able to trace. Then I will wrap the paper around the various parts of a heart to see basically how the proportions are going to go. What looked good on a flat may not look good as a cylinder. So there's a lot of trial and error to get a design that would look good from all angles, not have empty holes here and too much clutter there and so forth. So moving along, we can see some more. Then we see the top part. So I've got the floral arrangement with a bit of a crown exact design. And again, more encanted leaves design with a lyre in the middle and some more leaves. So once the artwork is put on, tested, then I transfer it with carbon paper. And that leads me to the next carving stage, which I think will be next. That's our front view of the same. And then I'll do the bottom view of the base of it, so you can see some leaf work around the perimeter and on top there as well.
Do you just like tape the carbon paper to the wood to keep it still, or?
No, this is actually, I've transferred it over with carbon paper. So the drawing of the paper, I put carbon paper and trace it all out, and that is a carbon paper imprinted onto the wood. And then the paper, I can just keep it copied for another one if I just choose to use it again. Then using the hand, go ahead.
So the carbon paper, I'm trying to remember how carbon paper works. You like affix the carbon paper to the wood and then use the pattern and you sort of press on it, right? And it presses the carbon into the wood to make the shape.
Right. Let's say that it's the black carbon paper and you've got the transfer side. Then you put your drawing on top of that, and then you just target with a pencil and trace whatever you're doing, and by pressing that imprint from the carbon paper inside onto the wood.
Got it.
And then that's what you see.
1 minute. Let's see here. Okay.
So this is a selection of hand tools. I just use small ones. I don't use a mallet and chisel. If I was an experienced carver working for Leon and Healy, then they have all the shortcuts with just using the big mallet and chisels, and they can get rid of a lot of material. But the different ways of going about that, one would be to carve into the wood to create the designs that you have in here. And other ways would be to have an applique, how you pronounce it, and to glue it onto the outer surface of the cylinder. So I haven't done that kind of style yet. Everything is carved right onto the wood. So once we get the flowers done there and around the perimeter, then I start veining the rest of it, and just rounding off the inside edges is start to create the final profile. So next. And we can see this is what I'm talking about veining. Now where you see the flowers, I have an awl that is spring loaded, and by pushing it trips the spring and pound in. So all those holes, those dimples in there, it is with a spring loaded marking awl punch. And then the rest of it would be just simply either carved or just veined and detailed a little bit inside. Okay, and we move next. And that's another view from a different angle, and carry on. And there's some details of how I do the base, and we can carry on. And now we're looking at the harp basically assembled to see how the artwork and the carvings all start to look. And we're getting ready to go into the next phase of building a soundboard and the backboard, and just start finishing the sound box itself, knowing that I can trust the assembly will not be altered by any means. So component by component, we finish it off. The neck will need to have from the template, have the hole drilled for the tuning pin, as well as the bridge pins. So yeah, next slide. So we see a sample of the big piece of paper that I have my drawing down with all the string spacing. And in this particular one, I started off with a 39 string harp, and the customer wanted to have the string closer together because her hand span was small, and she was always extending her hand too much to play the bass string. So she wondered if I can close the gap between the strings, which offered me another string at the bottom. So it became a 40 string harp instead of a 39. And that also has a visual cue because the bottom string is now a blue one. I should mention that the red strings on the harp are C, and the blue strings on the harp are F, and the white strings in between, I have no idea why they're there. But anyway, we use them. They fill in the rest of the notes between C and F. So all the red strings are C and all the blue strings are F, and this way the bottom string is an F, and it helps to have a visual cue to be able to pluck and choose a string that's needed. So we're looking at two ribs. The thinner one with all the holes is the top rib that goes in the top of the soundboard, and the other rib in the bottom, it goes inside the soundboard. And it to give extra strength and bowing because you've got a lot of tension, particularly in the bass register. Once you get in the top treble section, it's not as needed because the width of the soundboard in proportion to the hole of the string, it changes a ratio. It's just the way it is. So next slide. We see the back of the soundboard, and because it's a large soundboard, I'm using 1/8 thick finished aircraft bird plywood. It has about 6 ply in 1/8 of an inch. And this material has actually been designed for radio controlled aircraft, so that when they crash, they don't break nearly as easy as if it was made out of balsa wood. So it's much, much stronger. So the strength to weight ratio in this plywood is extremely strong. And then I double it up so that it's about 1/4 of an inch thick in the center, and then I shave it down to just taper off into the 1/8 by the time we get to the perimeter. So the back rib that you see there, that it to give some extra strength against resisting a bow. Then in the next frame, we will see the front of it. And by measuring carefully with the diagram, we put the standard rib in there and they drill it in, and then I do brass eyelet in each of the holes in order to be able to withstand the angle pull of the string. I see questions here that the tension of each string and the total tension. The tension varies from about 10 pounds in the extreme treble, down to about 70 pounds in the bass. And if you take an average, it's around 30 pounds overall. And all of it combined gives us tension of about 1,500 pounds of tension. So that's why you have to build a soundboard strong, particularly in the bass register. Then moving along, we see it fitted inside the sound box and getting ready to go. And hammer distortion didn't give really a true shape of it. It is narrow in the top and the back. I should mention you can see a bit of a taper from the front to the back. So the sides are not straight, but they've been angled in. And that is to make it a little bit narrower to fit more comfortably on the shoulder, particularly the upper range. The back of many pedal harps, all pedal harps are going to be round, but the flat back on most folk harps are going to be flat for the reason that it helps the acoustical properties for some reason. Gibson changed the mandolin world when they went away from the half pear shape in the back to a flat. And because you got parallel surfaces, that apparently helped to really amplify the sound better. So a flat back acoustically has an advantage over a round back, but when you're in a pedal harp and you got the pedals surrounding it, the flat back is not practical. So the round is for the pedal harps. Okay, and then move along. Now we're seeing the harp put together, not only with the ribbon plates, but I've got the edges put on there. And to finish more of the woodworking, I'm testing out a few brick pins. The tape in there is just some strings. So just testing my string length are right and in position and just checking a few details. And then we move along. And another view of the same. And you can see on the neck, I've got the hole for the brick pin on top. The tuning pin on top. And the brick pin underneath it. The brick pins are threaded. So it is part of the regulation. You can take it in or out, but you want to try to have it set in roughly about a ½ inch from the side of the neck for the string to vibrate from. If you have it more, it's amazing how much the torque will add up and want to try to bend the harp over. So if you can bring it in close, the string isn't quite as high. The tuning pins I should mention are tapered, much like a violin. They are not normally threaded as in a piano. And piano should probably look into tapered tuning pins, because I saw a video about that, but I just got for another time, and it has a definite advantage. And then moving on. That would look like inside the circuit before I glue the top on there. So you can see that I've routed out a profile around the edge, and that is so that the glue edge is where glue and brad nail the soundboard is not touching the surface inside of it, so it expands or extends the width of the soundboard to give a fuller bass sound. The back has very little tension whatsoever, so it is simply the holes are no sign for sound or anything. It's so that you can replace strings, and it's more of a cosmetic application. And then you see some braces inside there. That to help the soundboard from trying to collapse the belly out more than necessary. All right, we'll move on. Now we're taking a look at the we took a look at the back of the harp, as well as the retrofitted finishing here. And yeah, next. And that'll be the front view. And you can see the side trim down there. So this is pretty much all the carving, all the preparation, everything glued together and ready for the next phase. I think I did get a comment that I have some echo in my room. I apologize for that. I just have a very live room and I'm sitting against the wall. So if that's something that's bothering me a little bit, my apology. Okay, next frame. Now we are looking at the painting phase of the pillars, and I'm using a Tremclad primer. This is where you want to get it nice and thick so you can stand it really, really smooth, because the surface of the gold paint you put on is very dependent on the quality of the finish underneath. Next picture. Now you see the gold paint on it. This is a common gold paint that you can find at Home Depot. You have to look for a lid that had the high gloss gold, not the matte finish. That would be a different enamel. So maybe about 8 to 10 cans will spray the whole pillar as well as the base that I use on it in order to give that really rich looking metallic look. And to date, that's the best paint I can find. Gold paint is really hard to find one that is very super durable and looks metallic. So my options there are a little bit limited. While we're here, I got in the chat, I got a question: how long did it take from beginning the first draft to design performance ready instrument? I thought that our work would be the first question, first answer, but typically about 3 to 4 months. So you're looking at maybe 3 months to this page here. The pillar takes a week to carve alone. So now we're taking a look at the harp that is ready for stringing. We can see the gold paint on it. We can see the amber colored thing that I've got on there. So now it's ready for stringing, which we can see next. And we've now got all the strings on there. And you can see the red and the blue in there and the white strings in between, and they just simply follow the C scale. Okay, I'm gonna move this, maybe it'll help my echo. So, excuse me. So at this point, it has to settle. It takes a couple of days to string it up and bring it up to tension in about a week to 2 weeks before we can actually start to apply the levers, because the stretch in the string is just crazy. It'll drop a whole semitone overnight for the first 3 days. It really takes a while to take the stretch out, and that's common with pianos as well. Okay, next slide. Now we are looking at the leverage. There's a variety of makers of leverage, but the crowning achievement used to be the Betty Truitt from the States, but she had since gone out of business. She's elderly. She's probably approaching 90, and it's just tired of assembling them by hand, even though she had the machine, so they're not available. So these are actually from Camac in France that built not only their own pedal harp and lever harp, but also had designed and thankfully made available to the public at large. The levers have basically 3-sided as well as wood pin sizes. So you can see that you got the smallest one in the front, and then the middle is a little bit bigger, and the threaded wood pin. Those are not tooling pins, by the way. Those are just bolts that I use on a sample board in order to test how to mount them. We lost the slideshow there.
Yeah, your signal was getting slightly weak there, so you were breaking out for a second. So I thought I'd pause us, but you didn't leave completely, but I wanted to make sure we caught what you had said. I missed a little bit of it, but why don't we take a pause and to check your speed and everything and answer this question from Larry. So Larry asked, where's that question here? There's the chat. Does your design follow the same design as an orchestral concert harp?
I would say very closely. Again, it's going to be the harmonic curve that you're choosing to work with that will give the gooseneck shape. So a concert pedal harp isn't built that way because wow, that's a really nice looking shape. It's so elegant looking. Just like a piano, you have to look at the scale design of your thinnest string going up. And once you get to middle C and below, that's when your variable just dramatically change. That's why we can have a 4'10" grand piano and a 9 foot, or rather a 10'2", like a Fagioli 308. And also with that 5 years with the vertical upright, you climb up a fire escape to play. The longer the string, the purer the sound is going to be. That the kid in the Orient, he built an 18-foot piano. He didn't have a wrap string in there. It's all a plain wire right down to the low A. And it's a string length that gives you the purity of the sound. And so bigger is better. And mainly I figured out is because if you take a length of string, you might have the fundamental pitch from end to end. But if you divide it in the middle, that should give you a third partial. But we have one little problem that we don't find a pipe organ, but we do a string. if we were to make the string a whole row of dimes, we can pull out the center dime and say that's what it is. So if this is 8440, then that should make it 880 on either side. That's a perfect octave higher. But taking out that dime, the string does not vibrate on that dime. It needs a flute to be able to flex, which means you're sacrificing part of the center to have the first partial flex in there. And that means that's not the true centers. You're talking 882 or 885 or something, what gives you the inharmonicity. So short bass strings have a really, in order to bring the frequency down for a given percentage of breaking point strength, they will have a really thick winding on there, which makes the center really thick in order to be able to flex, which shortens the first partial, which throws your math completely out of the water. And that's why they sound so ugly. But if you can go to a 9-foot piano and you've got a long string that is thin, you still have to have the wrappings, but the percentage in the middle is going to be not only closer, but less significant to the overall length. So it's going to be mature to give those other parts plus all the rest of them. And that right away is what's going to give you the purity of the bass tones, not so much the soundboard, it's the string itself, it's giving you that energy. And that would allow a concert ground to just have a much more pure sound to blend all the way through the register than a 4'8" piano. So the same thing with the harp. If you have the bass strings are too short, you have to have thicker string, or you can't even go down a beat before it muddies out like a clothesline. So that's where the gooseneck comes in. It's a very aggressive harmonic curve that you use. It could be built taller, but it just simply gets impractical because a string maker can't make longer strings than a certain length anyway. So I hope that answered the question there. That's why it follows that curve.
Perfect. Yeah, and then let's go back to the these are just called levers or pedal. What do you call the things we were looking at there?
They're called levers.
Levers. All right, so let's go back to that lever slide and just start from the beginning of explaining that slide, because you were breaking up for a minute when yeah.
Okay, so we have 3 sizes of levers, and we've got 3 bridge pins in the KMAC design to correspond with them. The bridge pin, as you can see, have a hex head on top, but they're threaded underneath, so they can rise up or down to adjust the height of a string in relation to the fret of the lever. Now, if you look at the middle one in particular, it's clear. You can see a pin to the middle left, not that one, but the other. Yeah, sorry, that pin. Oh, the other one in the middle. Sorry, that's a screw. Okay, up, it's into the middle of it. Yeah, take a point there. That pin coming out to the top of the string, that will push down when you operate the lever. And that would engage against the string, and the bottom part with the slotted screw head on there, that is called a fret, and that's where it terminates. So that is the new reference point for this vibrating length of each string from the bridge pin. So the bridge pin will say be attuned to B flat, and when it pressed against that silver pin with a slot, that one, then the new pitch will be B flat. So that had to be positioned to give exactly a semitone, and you use that with the electronic tuning. So that would flip up and down. So this is a lever harp, but a pedal harp will use it with the pedals, and they have a whole different disc and fork system. So lever harps are limited that you can only have 1 bank of levers below the bridge pin, where the pedal harp has 2 banks. So that means the pedal harp will be tuned to C flat major, which sounds like B major. When you engage the pedals in the middle position, then you're engaging all the disc to give you C major. So now you can have the flat above it, but then a second row of discs will give you C sharp major. So you have 3 positions. You have C flat, C natural, and C sharp. So when you engage all of these and you go to the bridge pin, then you can have the flat. So if you want to play in the key of F, you go to the B pedal and release it so that you can hear B flat. Now you can play in the key of F. If you want to play in G major, all your pedals are set in the middle, and you go to the F pedal and you raise to the bottom, which gives you F sharp. Now you can play in G major. So that's how an orchestral harp with a pedal can join an orchestra and playing in the key. Lever harps are limited from E flat major to E major, and the keys outside of that range are not possible unless you tune to favor them. So this is the next best thing. So moving along, this is a process of actually installing them, and you can see the bridge pin, the tuning pin, and the leverage. So the leverage with the blue that corresponds with the blue string, the lever with the red corresponds with the red string, and it's very, very meticulous work to be able to mount them, because you can't have the strings side by side when you engage them, and it's have to give exactly the right pitch, or you can have tuning problems in the more distant keys, the more leverage you use. So the litmus test is you can engage all the levers and the harp is still in tune. And if you do that, job well done. If you don't, you screw it up somewhere. And the last one should show what basically looks like in a whole set. Yeah, so you can see I'm working on it. This is my tuner, and I put the towel on there so that the other strings are not vibrating and giving false sympathetic vibration to it. You've got to be hearing just each string carefully by itself. So tedious, backbreaking work, but once that's done, it's a sigh of relief when it all come together well. And I think last photo shows a finished product. There it is. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I'll show this. Why not? This was interesting because I visited Peru, and when I was in Lima, I was walking down the street and I just found these local guys that built Peruvian harps in Peru. So maybe that's fun to just kind of see what a little bit more. It looks like they have a little bit less tools and training at their disposal, but it's kind of interesting to see. I put it in here so we can check that out for a minute. A little bit of a look at the diversity of harp construction. Yeah,
it's just amazing how all around the world you got the different approach to building it. You got a pair of grand that has unique feature to itself and so forth. You have a question here. If you have a pedal harp, the one pedal does it all. That's right. So if you're sitting in with the pedal harp in front of you, you have 3 pedals on your left foot and 4 pedals on the right foot. The left foot will start with a B, C, and D from the center out, and the right foot will have E, F, G, and the far one is A. So in the middle of the pillar are rods that will connect, so that all the F's would be linked together inside, and when you press the F pedal, they all link together. It's a machinery that is very, very complex. And interestingly enough, it was designed by and invented by Sebastian Erard, who also gave it a double escapement grant action. So Sebastian Erard in 1810 came up with this, and he is very influential in why we have the modern instruments we have today. So that's what it is. Whereas on a lever harp, yes, you have to flip them individually to choose a key. So if you know what the key is, you flip them according to the key you want playing. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we're at about 5 minutes left, so we spent a good time covering that, and it fit nicely. I think we got a lot of useful information out of this one. Ernest said that you also used Varituner to try out a tuning style for tuning this harp. That sounds interesting. Does a piano tuning device do a? I guess you would have to adjust the sort of stretch pretty. You'd have to do a custom tuning style because it wouldn't be the same as a piano tuning. You would have to kind of customize it quite a bit, right?
A little bit. Most hybrids out there are not aware of these other devices, nor do they have access to it. So they would use just standard chromatic tuner that you find, like a Korg or this or that, or whenever you get in the iPhone, So that is more than enough to do it. And most people do not develop a keen tuning ear. So they tolerate types that maybe aren't tuned quite clean. But if some of them get very, very picky and they know what to listen for by experience, and they just tweak it and hear a little bit and so forth. But the inharmonicity of every stringed instrument will be different. So to really have your particular harp fit in, that's where having a very tuner with different styles and stretching capabilities will just tweak it a little bit sweeter. Yeah.
All right, and we might have time for one or two more questions. So if anybody has that, or they want to come in and ask something, feel free. But if not, we'll be wrapping up very shortly because it's about the end of the hour. Really, really cool stuff, Glenn. Thanks for joining us. And
Pleasure.
yeah, any other final words? And I'm sure you've clearly got a lot of awesome sort of technical knowledge, and you do a great job of explaining things. So we'll have to talk about maybe doing a masterclass or something like that on the topic of your choice. But I think we could get some cool members only content from you. I think that's quite possible. So we'll have to open up that conversation. And any parting words before we jump off, or any final questions from the Peanut Gallery? So, and I will also put this text in the chat. So I put some text in the chat for everybody there. So, you can make sure and provide us some feedback. Make sure you sign up for the David Clavins Masterclass that's coming up. Check out the French Paulus Masterclass with Doug Gregg. Make sure you join up for the weekly radio hour subscription if you want to get all this content in a member area and direct links and things like that. I will also mention for subscribers now. Oh, good, Ernest. Sorry, the links might have not worked previously, and now they do. So that's good. I'm glad. We will, from this point forward this year, for subscribers, be offering a monthly masterclass, monthly masterclass level content. And what we've done is we've bookmarked the third Thursdays of every month for that at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. So if you're a member and you want to attend those live, you can mark your calendar, just count the third Thursday of every month for the rest of the year, 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern time. And of course, for those of you with appropriate level of subscription, the recordings will be in the member area if you missed the content, so forth. But yeah, we're looking forward to getting a nice regular clip on some of that content. Again, David Clavins, that's the third Thursday of April. And then we've got some other cool master classes in the works. So make sure you check that out and sign up if you're interested. And then again, any other final words from you, Glenn, before I read our outro?
There's a really good quote that I read that we can all take to heart. The difference between a master and a novice is a master failed way more times than a novice ever tried.
All right. Yeah. Agreed.
So onward, upward, keep going, and we'll learn from each other's mistakes and hopefully not repeat them and go from there.
Yeah, I agree. I will say though, man, being willing to fail quite a bit, it gets stressful, but it is the path. It is the path to progress. I totally agree with you. And so kudos to you and others who've taken those challenges on. Awesome. Okay, well, we've reached the outer limit at the edge of Piano Tech Radio Hour again today. Thanks for Glenn for joining us today. As always, we're brought to you by Piano Technicians Masterclasses. It's cutting-edge instruction from piano industry masters without leaving your home. For those of you that joined us today by signing up for the session individually, you could make your life more convenient and simpler. Just subscribe to Piano Tech Radio Hour at just $16 per month. You'll get the recording of today's session in our member area, as well as automatic registration for each week's new session. You could sign up at bit.ly/joinptrh. That's bit.ly/joinptrh, all lowercase, no spaces. And thanks again for joining us today. There's one more thing I want to mention. I just sent an email out about it, and we're just getting started. We're starting a PTM, Piano Technicians Masterclasses Global Ambassador Program. And if you're interested, it's a way for you to benefit from the growth of this community. If you're the type of person that is spreading the word and bringing other technicians and industry experts on board as subscribers to the content, then you could be financially rewarded for that. And so I've just sent out an email about that. If you didn't get that and you're interested, you can email me at ethan@pianotechniciansmasterclass.com. But yeah, it's a way for you to earn commissions when other people that you've recommended to Piano Tech masterclasses and radio hour join the sessions. So if you're interested in that, feel free to reach out and we'll give you some more info. It should be a fun way to grow the community and spread the love among everyone that's participating. All right, guys, thank you so much. Thanks a lot, Glenn, and we'll see you all next week. Bye-bye.